Happy New Year, everybody! It is officially January 1st, 2023. And before we get into any new releases this year, you know what we have to do first. And those were just all of the tickets that I didn't buy online. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that 2022 was a pretty crazy year. And in terms of movies, in all honesty, it was a pretty good year. If you've been following me since my Instagram days, you know that in 2021, I didn't even give a single movie an A+ rating. But this year, we had like four, I'm pretty sure. 4 A+ ratings, which compared to 2021 is huge. And to celebrate that, along with many other compliments towards movies this year, we have my top 10 favorite movies of 2022. Now, before we get into any of that, I do need to make two things perfectly clear. One, this is a subjective list. My list is probably not the same as your list. If you disagree on my list, that's perfectly fine, yada, yada, yada. And also, I didn't see every single movie this year, despite the fact that I did everything in my power to do so. And one other thing that I just remembered, even though I did review a fair few of these on my YouTube channel, there are a couple that I don't have reviews up for in terms of video. I do have reviews of them on my Letterboxd, which you can see in the description down below, but for time purposes, I couldn't really get to every single video review of all of these movies. So if you have a movie here that you loved and I didn't review, chances are I reviewed them on my Letterboxd. With that said, before we get into the actual list, I do have a couple honorable mentions. Movies that I really did love this year, but just sort of missed out on the top 10 by this much. And starting off, we do have Jackass Forever. Now, I will stand by that seeing this movie opening night in a packed theater with every single person laughing their asses off along with me was might have been the best theater experience I've had all year. Barbarian was a complete shock to me, along with, I'm pretty sure, everyone else. Even the trailers gave nothing away about this movie, and it really does stand out as probably the most shocking horror film of the entire year. And keep in mind, horror this year has been really good. Babylon is a movie that's been very divisive, but honestly, I loved it when I first saw it. I thought it was so energized, I thought it was so funny, I thought it was so entertaining, and I really liked the storyline about the progression of silent films into talkies. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever was everything that I could have wanted this movie to be. I thought the characters were so interesting. I thought the story was heartbreaking. And more than anything, it truly did live up to not only the high expectations of the first Black Panther, but also just the memory of Chadwick Boseman himself. And lastly, we have Top Gun Maverick. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Top Gun Maverick, and having this as an honorable mention should mean a lot for the 10 films that follow it. But again, I love Top Gun Maverick so much, seeing it in a 4DX theater might have been arguably, debatably better than the Jackass Forever theater experience that I had. I love those 5 films so much, but as you all know, there are 10 movies that I liked even more, and we start off this list with if Get Out and Us didn't herald in the fact that Jordan Peele is a titan in the director's chair already, Nope solidified that. This is definitely one of the most entertaining movies in pretty much almost every single aspect that I could love a movie for. It was hilarious, it was tense, it was interesting, the acting was incredible, and more importantly, it was tense as hell. There are scenes in this movie that stuck with me for weeks after first seeing it in theaters. This movie is so good. Is it a horror or a thriller? That's up for debate, but is it amazing? Absolutely. Knives Out was already one of the best movies of 2019, and if you know 2019 movies, that's saying a lot. So the fact that Glass Onion is arguably just as good as the first Knives Out is a huge win in my book. Pretty much everything that I loved about the first Knives Out movie is the same as everything that I loved about Glass Onion. I thought it was so funny. I thought the story was interesting. I thought the mystery was compelling. And by the end of it, it did all make sense in a way. And even though I personally have tiny issues with the ending, that is far beyond any of the pros that I have for this movie. I thought Glass Onion was so good. The Northman was a movie that had high expectations going for it. When it was released, every single person loved it, but as time went on, more and more people started to drop off from the hype. And thank God a lot of people by the end of the year still had it on their list just as much as I have it on mine. The performances are great, the action's amazing, the cinematography is gorgeous, and more importantly, the story has so much weight behind it that it never really felt like I was just watching a film. It truly felt like I was watching something that was in a Norse mythology story centuries ago. It had so much weight to it, it had so much history behind it, and God, I loved every second of it. Marcel the Shell with Shoes On is probably the most heartfelt, wholesome movie I could have seen all year. I thought the stop motion was so good, I thought the performances were amazing, and more importantly, I thought the story and the dialogue and the script itself was just so innocent and heartwarming that any faults that I had with the movie were almost instantly forgotten the moment that Marcel opened his mouth and started talking to the documentary person. It's such a wonderful movie, and obviously, if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and watch it immediately. Now, seeing Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness on a list of my favorite movies of the year might shock a fair few of you. But for me, I have a weird relationship with this film. When I first saw it, obviously I loved it. And then after seeing it, I heard all of the complaints, and my opinion started to sour and sour and sour more and more and more about this film. But then I watched it again, and I had so much fun with it. And that sort of cycle just repeated throughout the year. But by the end of the year, I ended up having just as much fun with this film as I did the first time. I love Doctor Strange already, and I love seeing the world of Doctor Strange, just seeing how big it can be, just seeing how imaginative it can be, especially with the mind of Sam Raimi of all people behind this film. And more importantly, I cared about every single person in this film. I loved Doctor Strange. I loved seeing the Illuminati. And more importantly, I loved seeing Wanda in this film. Wanda and Scarlet Witch, in my opinion, is probably the best here that she's ever been in any single installment of the MCU. I know a lot of people disagree with me on this, but for my money's worth, I got what I wanted with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But coming in the halfway spot, yeah, we all know that the best multiverse movie of 2022 is Everything Everywhere All at Once. I mean, what can I say about this movie that hasn't been analyzed to death since its release? The acting's amazing, the action is awesome, the comedy is so hilarious, the editing is probably the best in any 2022 movie, and just the story and how much familial heart is behind every single scene in this film just strikes you on this level, on this really personal level, where A lot of times, even though a lot of what you're seeing on screen could overwhelm you, you always feel grounded because the movie always feels grounded. It is a marvel that such an indie studio, well, not so much indie anymore, but a smaller studio like A24 accomplished a movie with such a huge scale that managed to reach so many audiences, and for that, it more than deserves a place on this list. The Menu is a movie that going into it, I thought it was going to be good, but coming out of it, I didn't think I would be so shocked by the movie. This is probably one of the most clever movies of the entire year. The dark comedy is great, the satire is interesting, and Ray Fiennes as the lead chef in this movie is so interesting in the little minute details of his facial performances or just his vocal performances that it just lends so much to the character itself. And the same can be said about pretty much every single actor in this film. It's such a good movie. I thought it was going to be good, but God, it was great. Ti West's X and Pearl could have easily both been on this list at more or less the same point, but rewatching them both, I do find myself liking Pearl a bit more than X. The color palette is so vibrant, and a lot of times that could be seen as charming, but in this movie, it just puts you more on edge, and what even puts you more on edge is just seeing just the wheels in the character of Pearl's head just turn and turn and turn and get more and more disturbing as the movie gets more and more crazy and disturbing as the film goes on. And a lot of that, along with Ti West's direction, and I'm 90% sure his writing, is Mia Goth's performance. She is so good in this movie. She is so Oscar worthy in this movie, and by God, if she doesn't get at least nominated for Best Actress, I am rioting against the Academy. Pearl is probably my favorite horror movie in all of 2022, and a lot of that, along with just the overall product being so good, is due to the fact that it has probably the most disturbing final image in all of 2022's movie history. It's so good. The Batman is everything that I could have possibly wanted from this film. It was so gritty and realistic, but the cinematography just made every single frame look like it was ripped straight from the comics, even though a lot of what we see was never like from the comics. It wasn't like a Watchmen situation. It was made right then and there, which means that this movie emulated the look of comics better than most comic book movies do nowadays. That is something incredible. And along with that, the score is amazing. The actors fully embody every single character that they're cast as. And more importantly, this movie is 3 hours long and I didn't feel a minute get slow. By the time the movie was over, I looked at my phone and honestly thought, that's it? It was that long? Huh. So if you know me, a lot of you are probably thinking, what could beat Batman in my eyes? One of my favorite characters of all time, my favorite superhero of all time. What movie could possibly beat it out for me in terms of the best of 2022? Well, let's be honest here. Steven Spielberg is one of those directors that I kind of hate to love, in terms that every single person that I know calls him the best director of all time. And all I want to say is, no, there are other better directors. But every single time that he releases a movie, I do love it. With the exception of a couple of the ones that he's released in the past 10 years, I do think that he is legitimately one of the greatest directors of all time, despite the fact that a lot of times I don't want to admit it. And The Fabelmans is probably his best work in a decade. The movie is just so charming and wholesome and down to earth and very real, considering the fact that this is a pseudo autobiography of Steven Spielberg's life. And he doesn't shy away from the fact that he could have been a dick in those days, and he has learned from that. There is so much in this movie that I related to that cannot even be described in words. A lot of the emotion I very much related to, and more than any movie this year, The Fabelmans truly rejuvenated the reason why I love film so much, why I want to go into this industry so much, and why I used to get such a glee out of film so much. I still do to this day, don't get me wrong, but God, nothing like what The Fabelmans showed me. It is such a fantastic film, and any single bad thing that I could have possibly said about Steven Spielberg beforehand, I apologize now, because The Fabelmans truly did turn me around on this guy. It is not only the best film of 2022 in my opinion, it is one of Steven Spielberg's best in my opinion. And that is my list on my 10 favorite movies of 2022. Do you agree with my list? Do you not agree with my list? Chances are you don't agree with my list, mainly due to Multiverse of Madness, but that's beside the point. Leave your top 10 favorite movies of 2022 down in the comments below. I would say that I can't wait for the new year to start, but first, we gotta get through the opposite of this list. Make sure to tune in for that, I guess. I'm gonna rage a lot, probably. Thank you guys so much for watching this past year. You truly are all the best. And make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon down below to stay up to date on a new year of all things movie, all things TV, all things nerd.